Let's welcome in our Josina Anderson there at Cardinals training camp. You've been able to talk to a number of players, head coach Cliff Kingsbury. We'll get to that in just a second. But being out there and observing this Cardinals team, what are the biggest keys for them, or the biggest key this upcoming season?
Well, it's going to be the continued maturation from a football standpoint of Kyler Murray. I mean, obviously, you have to recognize how this team has definitely evolved and progressed with him as quarterback. Prior to Cliff Kingsbury getting here, this team was 3-13, and they have gone from 5 wins to 8 wins to 11 wins last season, starting off very hot 7-0. Now, obviously, the season didn't end the way Kyler Murray and this team wanted it to with that 34-11 loss to the Rams, which was very surprising, but I think what that did illuminate for Kyler Murray, especially with his mindset coming into this season, is that the stage is big when the pressure is on. And even though he did really well in that game against the Cowboys at AT&T Stadium, we expected that because he was so familiar with that stadium. Then when the magnitude of the stage changed, we saw, some regression to some degree. So when I talked to Cliff Kingsbury this morning, and, obviously A.J. Green, who is another target for him in his second season here with the Cardinals, they talked about the fact that, he is still growing in his skin as a leader, and that he is doing what he's expected to do, and how much he's still participating in meetings and being vocal despite the delay, coming off COVID and things like that. So that's really going to be interesting to see, particularly when you consider some of the new pieces on offense for Kyler Murray. But they have to take that next step this season. I think the caliber of the assets are too strong to not go past the wild card round this year.
You mentioned starting the season at 7-0. They were on an absolute tear. Then they had an absolute roller coaster to the second half of the season. When you spoke to Cliff Kingsbury, he said he kind of wants to change the narrative around some of those late season falters. How do you begin to do that?
Well, I think it's just about, having focus through all 4 quarters. I think even Cliff Kingsbury steadily, we talked about that. I asked him that off the jump, just in terms of how he has evolved as a coach with those situations too, and, fine-tuning those things. And I think everybody collectively, because remember, everyone came together 3 years ago between Cliff Kingsbury, the defense coordinator, Vance Joseph, Kyler Murray. They're all going into their 4th season. And I was just talking to the defensive coordinator before we came off live here, and everyone's talking about how it has to go up that extra notch. And so when you're looking at the back half of the season and people start to get more tape on you, those are the things that you have to adjust to. I remember having a conversation with Josh McDaniels one time, and he said that some of his best stuff he still holds in his back pocket when you kind of get more tenured as a coach in this league, for the postseason and the late season run, because people are going to be watching the tape and they're going to come back on you. So those are the adjustments that I expect to see relative to this season. But what I thought was interesting, just as far as the takeaways from practice, Kyler Murray did throw today a little bit in individual drills. He did not do that yesterday, coming back, as I was saying, acclimating from COVID. But what a source just told me right before we came on is that, let's not make this not a breaking news or what have you, but dealing with a little bit of a risk, something that I heard happen right around the time that he got sick for COVID. So I think that is participating in why he didn't, throw as much today, because I was asking myself, if you're going to be out there for individuals, why not be out there for a little bit more? And someone just gave me some context for that. Right now, we know that they have their preseason game against the Bengals. Someone was telling me they're not expecting Kyler for that, but we'll see. There's still some time. It's just Tuesday.
So we won't make a big deal of the wrist thing. There could be a potential small wrist thing.
No
going with Kyler Murray. Don't run away with it. We won't do that. Look, the last time you did see Kyler Murray, though, you were at that game, the wild card game with the Cardinals and the Rams there. And as you mentioned, he came off the game at AT&T Stadium and he looked awesome. And you said in that wild card game, it looked like he almost wasn't ready for that big of a stage, but everybody thought he should be. So you have been observing him at practice, not as much as you wanted to, but you have been observing him there. He now has that huge contract. What is the vibe just kind of surrounding Kyler, his leadership, and heading into the season?
Well, I think it was good to see him taking the mental reps, and even though he wasn't participating in all of the team drills, still kind of going back and forth with the team. Listen, when you get paid a five-year, $230 million plus contract, the organization is sending you a message that this is yours, and they're telling you what they also expect of you relative to the trajectory of this team in terms of continuing to go up. So you realize that this is his team. I mean, even watching practice out here with Trace McSorley taking a majority of the reps out here. I mean, we need the quarterback depth to be there, but obviously that's not who the fans are coming out here to see. That's not who we are coming out here to see. So we all know whose team that this is. I think that it's a very, very important year for him. And even though, like I said, that Cliff Kingsbury has taken this team progressively higher every year, I did ask him about the pressure that perhaps is still on him with the relatively recent college label still on him and Kyler Murray. So I think it's imperative, especially with that contract and all the controversy around the homework clause that's not there and all that other stuff, and relative to all the assets that are on the team, for them to take the figurative next step.
Let's talk about the wide receivers. No DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games of the season. They did add Hollywood Brown during this offseason. I've been reading that he's been dealing with a tweaked hamstring, so I don't know what his status is. Give us an update on this wide receiving core and what it looks like right now.
Even though they lost Christian Kirk to the Jaguars, DeAndre Hopkins, as you mentioned, missing the first 6 games because of that PED suspension. Listen, they still have a wide receiver core to reckon with. I mean, you talk about A.J. Green, and I know we're going to talk about him a little bit more, but this guy is still doing at the age of 34. I mean, for him to come here and have almost 900 receiving yards after 10 seasons with the Bengals, you have that going for you. And then obviously, Cliff Kingsbury has been talking a lot about the 2021 second rounder and Rondale Moore. We've been seeing him out here get his reps as well, and he is looking good. And then also you have Andy Isabella, who has been doing his thing. And then Marquise Brown. I mean, that's the thing that we all really want to see, especially bringing him over here from Baltimore and not really having that much time. Remember, he got here via the trade during the draft. And then obviously just coming off of the non-football list, injury list last week. Unfortunately, having the situation with the speeding, but it was good to see him get some reps out here, albeit not with Kyler Murray, just to show and flash that speed or what have you. So when they finally do get on the same page, that's what we're going to be looking to see. And hopefully Kyler Murray can hurry up and get back on the field so they can build that connection, because they haven't had too much time since he just got here at the backside of April.
You mentioned A.J. Green, you were able to talk to him. He was able to also re-sign. What did he talk to you the most about, maybe when it comes to himself or what he wants to do this season?
Well, I just think it's interesting. I mean, when you think about A.J. Green and just the storied career that he had in Cincinnati and all those years with Marvin Lewis or what have you, you just think about him being that A1, X1 option out there. And then for him to come here and then talk to me in that interview, which you guys will see a little bit later on CBS HQ, about, having all these jitters and anxiety, learning a whole new system, just hearing that humility on him and how he had to acclimate, I think is very interesting. But even with all of that, like I said, he still had 848 receiving yards relative to that situation. That was his best since 2017, despite the fact that they were trying to push him out. Well, all right, to a degree. I mean, but that really was kind of the case, right? Because it's a new coach, not disrespectfully. But, when you have a veteran there, you're trying to put your stamp down, you're trying to move on. That's effectively what happened. So for him to come in his first year here, still have that type of production. And then we also talked about how it was very interesting that with DeAndre Hopkins on the field, because, he missed some games with an injury last year, that his numbers were actually down when that was the case, when he was off the field, and then when he was on, it was the opposite. So that was counterintuitive. But so he has some familiarity already with DeAndre Hopkins not being on the field. So just looking to kind of take that to another step, and then reminding folks that you can still get it done as a receiver in 30 plus years, of age or what have you. So that's what he's looking forward to do. And then I think when you look at the fact that this team, that schedule to start off against the Chiefs for the week opener, the Las Vegas Raiders week 2 after that in Las Vegas, and then the Rams. They have an absolute gauntlet to start, so they are going to get a measuring stick right out of the gate as far as where they are relative to how they ended last season.
no DeAndre Hopkins again for the first 6 games of the season. Let's talk about Budda Baker anchoring a top 10 scoring defense here. I've been watching some interviews with him, and he's wearing this shirt, Camp by Respect, all around camp. He says it's his favorite shirt there. He says, I don't care if I'm the #1 safety, the 11th best safety. I am here to hold myself to a very high standard. What's the update with him and this defense?
Well, Budda Baker is going to be Budda Baker, obviously perennial Pro Bowler and contributing to this defense. I think the thing that you want to highlight with respect to where they are is that they lost Chandler Jones to the Raiders, as we mentioned. They lost Jordan Hicks, and they also lost Jordan Phillips. So some key pieces there on the defense. And then what you've been hearing about a little bit with the concerns on the defensive side of the ball is who is going to be that option opposite Byron Murphy, right? Because they are a little bit thin there. Now, what's interesting with that is that DeAndre Baker just got released from Kansas City, so you've been hearing his name, in the media here, like, are they going to sign DeAndre Baker? Chris Harris Jr., who was with the Chargers last season, is an option out there at corner. So I was just asking someone before we came on, is that going to happen? I think the desire is definitely there. We'll see if it does, but I've been hearing about the desire for extra depth and the cornerback spot, and Budda Baker said obviously that's not his domain, but he recognizes the need to just augment there. And then really it's just about the pressure that they're able to get. When you talk about starting off against Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, we'll see who's going to be the quarterback for the Rams with Matthew Stafford and that elbows injury, but they need to maintain and getting that pressure on the quarterback, and the loss of Chandler Jones is certainly notable here. But Budda Baker feels like this is a defense that is still on the upward trajectory and is doing well to get everything coordinated in Vance Joseph's 4th season. So a lot to try to accomplish in terms of getting better relative to the goals for next year, especially going further in the postseason, rather.
Josina Anderson, we appreciate it. Have fun out there as our training camp tour continues. Josina's been all over the country for us, checking in with all these training camps. Since you mentioned the schedule there, let's take a closer look at the Arizona Cardinals' upcoming schedule. Beginning, yes, incredibly difficult with the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Rams. According to CBS Sports, the Cardinals do have the 2nd toughest schedule in the NFL, just behind the Rams. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.